season of new beginning, and we cherish the season with the understanding of philosophy in our other way around. Like when two misfits in the 19th century had a particularly strong influence on the later existentialist, how they react and how the public react over their philosophies. So, yes, I'm talking about Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche. Both were individualist and uh, both were contrarians by nature. Both sit outside of main story of modern existentialism, but had a great impact on what developed later. So Kierkegaard set the tone by using the term existential. So ex- Soren Kierkegaard is the most influential and very important philosopher of existential philosophy. And today we will listen on the topic philosophy as autobiography, contextualizing the thought of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche. Our today's speaker is Dr. Varun Sharma from Jammu University. He is an assistant professor there and he earned his doctoral degree from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. So I welcome Dr. Varun Sharma, my friend. Please welcome and start the lecture.
Thank you, everybody, and my greetings to everyone who is here and to everyone who will be seeing it on YouTube or later. So, first of all, let me say why I have chosen this topic. Actually, this is a part of my dissertation, my PhD dissertation. Shipra, am I audible? Is it echoing or is it
Yeah,
clear?
yeah.
It's clear. Okay.
Perfectly. Yeah.
Okay, so the title is Philosophy as Autobiography, and I am myself, I love autobiographies. I myself am an avid reader of autobiographies. And I think autobiographies or personal lives of people written by themselves provide us a very deep and intimate encounter with their thought, sometimes more than what they have written otherwise, what they have written otherwise. So in my thesis also, when I was studying Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, I felt that they were different from other philosophers in one very important way, that they were more willing to engage and they were more accepting of the fact that they were engaging with their own thought, their own lives, and their various aspects. So that's why I thought it was very significant. And presently also I'm working on a paper on the same theme. So I'll be reading from that paper as well, time to time. So let us begin with, I'll begin with two quotations. One is from, both are from German philosophers. One is F.C.S. Schiller, who writes, he's distinguishing philosophers from scientists. So he says, actually, every philosophy was the offspring, the legitimate offspring of an idiosyncrasy, and the history and psychology of its author had far more to do with its development. The naive student insists on viewing the system from the outside as a logical structure and not as a psychological process extending over a lifetime. And he thereby throws away or loses the key to understanding. So Schiller is saying that the key to understanding a philosopher is not the logical structure of his thought, but rather the history and psychology of its author. And let's now move on to another quotation by Fichte, the German philosopher, who says, what sort of philosophy one chooses depends, therefore, on what sort of a man one is. For a philosophical system is not a dead piece of furniture that we accept or reject as we wish. It is rather a thing animated by the soul of the person who holds it. So both of these thinkers are establishing the fact that we cannot divorce philosophy from the author, from the life and psychology of the author of the philosophy. So when we are talking about such a theme, two most important philosophers in my view are Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche. And their writing betrays an intimate engagement with their own life. And before them, also thinkers have like brought in themes from their own lives in their writings. And after them, also this has happened. But for with them, for the first time, we see a proud and explicit engagement, like they are accepting of the fact that they are putting their own lives into their philosophies, And they also think that this is sometimes a better way of approaching philosophy than the objective and the impassionate, impartial analysis of things as philosophers claim to do. For example, Western philosophy, the philosopher's ideal has been a dispassionate, impartial, and detached analysis. Dispassionate, detached, and impartial, not taking sides, very detached, not getting engaged with their lives. They are more focused with the whole, on the whole, rather than the particular. For example, this is exemplified most best in Hegel's dictum, the real is rational and the rational is real. Like the reality is made subservient to the thought rather than thought is made subservient to the reality. For example, I have one more quotation from Hegel where he says in Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences, the significance of that absolute commandment, that is, know thyself, whether we look at it in itself or under the historical circumstances of its utterance, is not to promote mere self knowledge in respect of the particular capacities, characters, propensities, and foibles of the single self, that is, not of the individual self. The knowledge it commands means that of man's genuine reality, of what is essentially and ultimately true and real, of spirit as the true and essential being. So, who is the true and essential being? The spirit, not the individual being. In response to this, Kierkegaard has written, being an individual man is a thing that has been abolished, and every speculative philosopher confuses himself with humanity at large, whereby he becomes something infinitely great and at the same time nothing at all. We are so focused with the whole that we lose sight of the particular, and for Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, the particular is where the life is lived rather than the whole. So, my thesis is that these two philosophers have brought in individuality into philosophy in two ways. One is the content of their writing, and second is the style of their writing. So, in the content of their writing, also like we see new categories brought in by them. For example, the concrete individual, the dilemma of choice, then subjective truth, then suffering as a value. These are very personal things. These are not generalized things. So we have to inquire. In my paper, I try to inquire what kind of, to what extent their philosophy is composed out of their own life. So one way to study it is the content, what themes they are dealing with, and second is how they are dealing with. For example, for with them, philosophy is not just a matter of what to say, but how to say it. And if we see their writings, we see there some very peculiar differences from the other philosophers before and after them. For example, philosophy is generally written in a dispassionate, we can say dry or very academic way of writing. Whereas Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, their writing sometimes border on literature rather than philosophy. Um, and then they are using aphorisms instead of essays. Like philosophy is generally, will we see philosophical essays or books? Nietzsche is writing in aphorisms. Then Kierkegaard is using pseudonyms. Then in Nietzsche's writing, we are seeing contrarieties. He's saying one thing at one place and another thing at another place. Then there is hyperbole, there is rhetoric. Then sometimes in Nietzsche's writing, we don't see even arguments. We are just seeing prophetic way of speaking, like in Thus Speaks Zarathustra. It's not even arguments. It's like as if a prophet is speaking to us. So a very different way of philosophical writing we see in their works. So my attempt is to point out why these things are, why their philosophy is so different in content as well as in writing, uh, in the context of their own lives. Whether there was something, some experiences or circumstances of their own lives that impressed them and influenced them in writing in this way, and writing about these things, like both style wise and content wise. So, for example, there is a quotation from Nietzsche. He says, all, and this is from in the introduction to Human, All Too Human. He says, all great problems demand great love, and of that only the strong who have a firm grip on themselves are capable. It makes the most telling difference whether a thinker has a personal relationship with his problems, finding in them his destiny, his distress, and his great happiness. This is Nietzsche himself, or an impersonal one, merely touching them with the antennae of cold, curious thought. So whether you are approaching the problem, whether is it to some extent bound up with your own life, in which you have a stake, or you are just like touching a problem with the antenna of rational thought, like you are just taking a problem and then thinking about it. What is philosophy? So in a way, they are also casting doubts about the traditional definition of philosophy. So let's start with the content first. So Nietzsche says that, for example, in Nietzsche, we see, if we look at Nietzsche's life, he is the son of a pastor, and his grandfather was also engaged with the church. His father was also engaged with the church. So, a very simple way, a very like one of the first things we observe is how this is playing into Nietzsche's dislike of Christianity and his lifelong opposition of Christianity. So, in a way, his pedigree is that of Christian pastors, and he is responding to them. And then, if you see what Kierkegaard is responding to, he is responding to Hegel, who was his prime adversary. And with Hegel, the life is a kind of, Hegel looks at life into stages where antithesis and thesis are resolved into something higher. So what we see is Nietzsche and Kierkegaard responding to their own lives. Uh, for example, in Kierkegaard's life, the most significant happening was, uh, he was in a relationship with a girl, Regine Olsen, and in the middle of his relationship, he thought that he would not be able to fulfill the requirements a normal life with Regine Olsen would ask of him. So he broke off the relationship. He pretended that he was in love with someone else and broke off the relationship. And for his whole life, he was riddled with the guilt of that. It is said that when he died, also he left his all his belongings to that girl. So here Kierkegaard has made a choice. He is under guilt, and he's under despair, and all of these things we see reflected in his writing. For example, I was reading a philosopher, and he says that Kierkegaard is making a sacrifice on various fronts. When he is leaving Regine, he is making a sacrifice. Then he is making a sacrifice of a normal family life. And if he had chosen Regine, he would have made a sacrifice of the academic life he wanted to take. So all these themes we see reflected in his works. For example, in Fear and Trembling, where the traditional story of Abraham and Isaac, where Abraham wants to sacrifice Isaac, and and there is guilt. All these elements are being brought from Kierkegaard's own life. And there is one more story. Like Kierkegaard's father was, he had humble origin. He was a shepherd, and one day when he was rearing the sheep, he cursed God for his miserable life. And after that, he was forever riddled with this guilt, and he thought that he was not going to live long. Many of Kierkegaard's family members died, and Kierkegaard forever in his whole life was also thinking that he would die an early death. So the guilt of his father also transferred to him, and this guilt also we see reflected in many of his writings. For example, there is a book, Kierkegaard's other books like Repetition and Philosophical Crumbs. The theme is whether it is possible to rescue meaning from a great loss. So, in a way, Kierkegaard is responding to his own life where he made a great sacrifice of his love, and he is always writing about those themes in his work. For example, in Kierkegaard's work, Either or, there's a segment which is an independent book. It is called The Seducer's Diary. And there, Kierkegaard is trying to explain to his beloved why he left him. So we see the book itself is an autobiographical account of Kierkegaard's own life. In the same way, in Nietzsche's writings, we see autobiographical themes. For example, his concept of the overman, his constant talk about the higher spirits. This is his this is born out of his fascination with Richard Wagner, the composer who Nietzsche idolized and later had a fallout. So Nietzsche says that Wagner was the most complete human being he had ever encountered, and two of the names of the books he has written, Case for Wagner and Nietzsche contra Wagner, are written in direct response to Wagner. And if and this is also a simplistic autobiographical device. We see that he's writing books about his own life and his idol. And then uh, um, Nietzsche has profound psychological knowledge, and even Sigmund Freud has commented on it. And then we see that Nietzsche had very little social encounters. So, how did he gain this knowledge? It was gained out of his study of himself as well as his study of Richard Wagner. He says, uh, Nietzsche, when talking about the philosophers, the traditional philosophers, the academic philosophers, he says, they all act as if they had discovered and arrived at their genuine convictions through the self development of a cold, pure dialectic. While what essentially happens is that they take a conjecture, an inspiration, or some fervent wish they have sifted through and made properly abstract. So, philosophy is, and unquote, so philosophy is in fact the intellectualization or the abstraction of an emotion. Here I remember Hume, where he says that men are slave to passions rather than reason. So it is not our reason that is being reflected in our philosophy, it is our emotions. But we impersonalize them, we give them abstract form, and then we present that as our own philosophy. So Nietzsche says that this is a bluff carried out by academic philosophers. He again says, I quote, uh, they are all advocates who do not want to be seen as such. For the most part, in fact, they are sly spokesmen for prejudices that they Christian as truths. So it is their prejudices which are being Christian as truths. So philosophers do little more than rationalizing their prejudices. They merely furnish a rationale for what they happen to believe already. Their philosophy is autobiographical, even if accidentally their dispassionate thought is actually unconscious confession. It is just that Nietzsche and Kierkegaard are more willing to engage and accept that their philosophy is in effect a engagement with their own lives. So, uh, then if we see Nietzsche's lives, if we should see Nietzsche's life, one important circumstance that was a permanent fixture with him was his constant ill health. He was, by all accounts, syphilitic. He suffered grave injuries. He suffered constant migraines. And then he was lonely for the most of his life. He didn't even have a country to speak of. He renounced his citizenship, and most of the time he was in boarding houses in Switzerland, in Italy, all across Europe. So he had no friends, very few friends, no partners. So this all contributed to his mental collapse. So in his writings also we see reflections of the same. For example, he talks about the suffering, the value of suffering. We have seen that in Nietzsche's writing, suffering has its own value. Like he says that only those value systems should be adopted which are possible, through which it is possible to withstand suffering a lot. So this is coming from his own life. He says, uh, only great pain, which takes its time, only this forces us philosophers to descend into our ultimate depths and to put away all trust, all good naturedness, all that would veil all mildness, things in which formerly we may have found our humanity. I doubt that such a pain makes us better, but I know that it makes us more profound. So he is talking about pain, and there are a lot of concepts. So, for example, he talks about health of a culture, germs of decadence, diseased region, breeding a new race. All these are medical terms. All these are terms related to sickness. All these are terms related to ill health. He talks a lot about these terms. And since he is an invalid, he is a weak person. What is his ideal? An overman, a strong person, a stronger person who has the health required to make the necessary changes and shifts in the human. So, um, in his own life, he turns his suffering into something. For example, before his collapse, in the last 2, 3 years of his life, where he was under constant pain and suffering, He produced the most number of books in that time. So he leads by his own example. What he's writing in his life, he's observing that in his own life. He is basically writing and reading and studying and analyzing in those ill times a great deal more than he used to do in his healthy time. And this he also advocates in his own works that suffering makes us slower, suffering makes us appreciate the things, suffering makes us a more observant of things which we usually take for granted. So, in a way, we can say that Nietzsche and Kierkegaard are autotherapists. Through their books, their work, they are bringing to light their own circumstances, their own learnings from those circumstances, and what they think is the um, is the medicine for it. Another incident or another thing I remember from Kierkegaard's life, and which has a parallel in his writings. For example, when we are looking at either or another work, we find that Kierkegaard talks about three stages of life. One is the aesthetic, one is the ethical, and one is the religious. And when I was reading about Kierkegaard's life, I can see like very transparent parallels because Kierkegaard was uh, when he was young, he was a member of the party circles in Copenhagen. He used to be an aesthete himself. And then he thought that he should sacrifice this aesthetic life because he wanted to adopt the life of an author, a very serious author, and that required some duties and renunciations of pleasures. So he moved himself from the aesthetic to ethical life, and then from there on, his Christianity took him to the religious life. So we see that reflected in his own life and his dissatisfaction with the church of the time. He was greatly dissatisfied with the church of his time. Therefore, his analysis of the religious state is not the traditional Christian religious state. It is a very personalized one to one relationship with God, one which he had in his own life. So, through this all this analysis, I wanted to convey that in their works we see a lot of things which are present in their own lives, and their work is in fact a response. And now to move on to the second part, we have to see this was in relation to what they wrote. Now let us see how they wrote it and whether that can be linked to their life circumstances or not. For example, Kierkegaard calls his way of writing indirect communication. Why this is indirect communication? Because in his works he never signs his works as his own work. It is not the Soren Kierkegaard is writing. They are all signed by different authors. For example, Repetition, Kierkegaard's book Repetition is narrated by Constantin Constantinus. And if you see the name Constantin Constantinus, it itself has repetition. Constantin Constantinus. Then Fear and Trembling is authored by Johannes de Silentio, which means Silentio means silent. So this is Kierkegaard is staying silent and Johannes is speaking. Then Philosophical Crumbs is by Johannes Climacus or John the Climber, where climbing means step by step going up. Then concept of anxiety. This book is by Vigilius of Nietzsche or Watchman of Copenhagen. And concluding unscientific postscript. This book is again by Johannes Climacus. So we see that Kierkegaard is not signing his works himself. He is saying that these are works of different authors. Obviously, the readers know that it is Kierkegaard, but he wants the readers to not to get attached to himself, but rather explore or understand these works as works of different people because he does not believe that one person's writing can be the objective model for everyone. Is hiding behind these pseudonyms. Uh, he says indirect communication is the only form of communication that it can help you in realizing subjective truth. So why does he do that? And another thing is when he is titling his works, these are not titled the way philosophical works are generally titled. For example, we find these subtitles: a dialectical lyric, a venture in experimental psychology, a fragment of philosophy, a mimical, pathetical, dialectical compilation, an existential contribution, and one of his works is simply titled Works of Love. So why is he doing that? Why is he saying using pseudonyms? This is can be traced to his earlier life. His father recognized that his son was brilliant from a very young age. So he always asked Kierkegaard not ever to come first or second in his class. He says always come third, so that people are very less attracted to your personality. So hide your personality if you want to become something in life. Then what his father used to do was uh, he, he he never took Kierkegaard to the streets of Copenhagen. He used to always ask him to imagine. He used to say, "This street goes there, then there's a church, then there's a shop, then there's a patisserie, then there is a well, then there is a school." So Kierkegaard always used to have this mental visualization. So it is these mental visualizations, this hiding, this constant keeping oneself behind in his own works. That is why he is never signing his works as his own work, and he is always creating a web of identities rather than simply saying that this is what I am saying. So in the way he is writing, the way he is writing is also traceable to his own experiences, to his own rearing by his own father. Then, if we look at Nietzsche, uh, how Nietzsche writes. So Nietzsche writes for in the earlier phase of his philosophy, he wrote essays, but later he switched on to writing aphorisms. Aphorisms are very small sentences in which Nietzsche says that it is my ambition to write in a sentence what one can say in a book. So he is writing in aphorisms. He wants his readers to work like it's like a soup or a sutra. You have to have a commentary of a sutra. It is a very small summary of the fact, and you have to work at it. So why is he doing so? We can say that it is a literary device, this and that. But one of the prime reasons was that in the later part of his life, Nietzsche was mostly writing when he was taking walks for his health. And obviously, when you are taking walks, you cannot write long treatises. You have to write in small sentences. So he's right. That is why. That is one of the reasons he's writing in aphorisms, because he's constantly in ill health, and that does not leave him the health or the pace to write long treatises. So he's writing in small paragraphs, short paragraphs. Then, if we see in his later writings, there are motifs and metaphors like heights, depths, abysses, peaks. There is a famous quote: "When you look into an abyss, the abyss looks back into you." So why is he writing? Why is he using these metaphors? Because he is traveling in mountains. There are heights, there are depths, there are abysses, there are peaks. So even the writing is influenced by the life and what is going on in the life of the author. So so in this way, if we have to conclude, we can say that they have left a rather different philosophical and as well as literary legacy. Their writings are different. What they are writing about is different, and they are philosophers of the individual. In fact, my thesis was also titled "Individual Truth and Authenticity." So they are writing for the individual. Their truth is the truth of the individual. That's why Kierkegaard also criticizes objective truth. Nietzsche also says that truths are. Nietzsche also talks about a perspectival theory of truth. Truths are perspectives. Truths are illusions. And then they are talking about authenticity. So who can have authenticity? Authenticity cannot be found in objectivity. It has to be found in subjectivity. So they are writing in a different way. And one important point is also that they are writing not for everyone, because they know that making their works difficult is going to put off many people. For example, in Kierkegaard's case, the way he is writing, many people are not going to like it, or many people are not going to like that he is not saying it straight away, or right, he is not, or he is not claiming authorship. Like you cannot say what Kierkegaard is saying. You can say what Johannes Climacus is saying. You can even find two or three contrary ideas also, and you won't be able to find out what Kierkegaard is saying. And this is planned. This is not accidental. Kierkegaard does not want to give an objective understanding. He wants you to work for it. In the same way, Nietzsche is writing aphorism, and he knows that not many people would be able to, or different people would have different ideas from the aphorism, but they want select readers. So in that way, also their philosophy is very personal, and that contributes to why they are so popular also. Um, so I think this would be a conclusion of my thesis, and I think I have covered most of the things I wanted to cover. I don't know how linear it has been, but let's see if anyone has some question or a clarification, then we will take that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Varun. Uh, and I have a very good expert on this topic, Kierkegaard, Dr. Priyanka Mishra. Please start, ma'am. Please start the discussion. And also we have Rakesh Chandra sir.
Don't please don't call
Ma'am.
me an expert on Kierkegaard. Thank you so much, Shipra, and I really am happy to see Varun after a long time. Uh,
Same here, same.
so it was indeed a very good presentation, and of course, I think the existentialist philosophers are like that. You know, when you read them, you always find it very fascinating. And I think Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, I both the philosopher had very strong religious upbringings, and both of them, that they studied theology, and I think later they changed their mind, but I guess after reading theology they must be planning ki hum log kuch aisa, we they wanted to become a church ka minister or pastor kind of thing. So I
Yes.
completely agree with you, Varun, that their, if you see their content of their writing, of course their focus is on suffering, subjectivity, and such things. But what I feel, when you see in both Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, I know we see how their philosophical ideas are inseparable from their personal experiences, and you can always find but I always find that that especially in the case of Kierkegaard, because he, why is he making nuisance for himself? When you are saying that he never claimed his authorship, because when you read that kind of writing, you see that of course he has a very deeper understanding, and he also talks about this lived experiences. But what I feel, when I read, and I always find it difficult for me, because there are certain questions which always comes to my mind when I read them, like how do the personal experiences and existential struggles of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, I know, because we are talking about their, if you see their philosophical life, manifest in their respective. Because I find that both the philosophers, especially this Kierkegaardian, approach, you see, mm, in because even there is a Kierkegaard was, I mean, I don't think he was he ever believed in the absurdity of life, especially in the manner Nietzsche is talking. I mean, maybe you can correct me, but I think there is a very great difference between both the philosopher. So
Yes, yes.
I'm not, but I'm just thinking, I'm just exploring. Maybe you can, because I have never thought Kierkegaard in this manner. You are talking, and maybe you can explore this, that when you read him, maybe. And I also
Yes.
saw, while reading Kierkegaard, I saw that that Kierkegaard has there are many certain people, of course they have written on Kierkegaard, and they said that no, because he was against this uh, Christianity, especially Christendom, the word he has talked about.
Yes,
So
Christian.
you see that Nietzsche was not that kind of philosopher, especially
Yes.
when you read him. I think Professor Chandra is also there. You can maybe he will throw some light on, because when he says that the God is dead, So,
Yeah.
and when you see there is a, in Kierkegaardian a notion, especially that is that stage, religious stage he's talking about. So there you see that, he says that, we need to take a leap. So how do you see these two things? It's a very different. I don't find them on the same, because I never see that there is a, even if you try to make a bridge, it is very difficult. So how would you see this thing?
Yeah, actually, that was why in my thesis also I point to this fact that they seem very opposed to each other. Like one is a devout Christian, the other is a like Antichrist himself. Some people call him, and but they are very because they both are existentialist thinkers or proto-existentialist thinkers. They both are critical of the Christianity of their time. Nietzsche, Kierkegaard does not make a break with it, although he uses the word Christendom, and he's not making a break with it, but he is more critical of the uh, like impersonal, like people go to people go outward. He says that the engagement is very outward rather than inward with Christianity. So he says that a leap of faith is not what people is making. They are going to church, they are giving donations, this and that, but that is not the real Christianity. The real Christianity is basically very difficult, where you have to believe in something. Where you have to have faith, and faith is not something which comes easy to you. So he is criticizing Christianity, but he does not make it like he doesn't think that there is no God or that the idea of God has no relevance. Whereas Nietzsche, because of his own studies, he thinks that the idea of God is a negative idea. Like it stops you from making something out of yourself. So where I make the bridge is like I took the three categories: individual truth and authenticity. They are both philosophers of the individual. Kierkegaard also says that engagement with the religious is not something which is public through the church or something. It is always very individualistic. And it is in this individual understanding, like how you see God, how God sees you. God sees you through a very individual lens. Like God does not see us as a total humanity. God sees us as individual humans. Okay. So it is in individuality where we find meaning according to Kierkegaard. For Nietzsche, the question God does not arise, but he is always talking about making something out of yourself. Like uh, he talks about lesser men, lower men, and higher men. So you have to make a higher man out of yourself. How do you make a higher man? By dissociating yourself from the lower men, by rising above those lower men and becoming individuals. So one is this. Then second is truth. If you take the category of truth, then you can also link both of these because both of these are talking against the objective notion of truth. Kierkegaard is talking about subjective notion of truth. Nietzsche is talking about a perspectival notion of truth. Both of them do not give much weight to the objective truth, which is common for everyone, because in that kind of truth we do not have a stake. That is not important for us. If tomorrow it is discovered that water is composed of nitrogen rather than hydrogen, would not make will not make any difference to my life. Okay. So and then there is authenticity. Both of them want individuals to lead authentic lives. Nietzsche says that you have to get away from the herd. Kierkegaard says you have to get away from the crowd. So in that way, many of the categories they employ are very same. Kierkegaard is talking about Hegel's system and he wants to oppose that. Nietzsche is talking about Christianity's system. He wants to oppose them. Both are very anti-systemic writers. They are always critical of systems and all such belief systems which ask you to behave in the same way and have the same ideals and this and that. So I think a case can be made that in spite of their differences, they can be brought together. In fact, a case we can ask whether because Nietzsche had not encountered Kierkegaard's philosophy before he was dead, he had not read about Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard obviously had
Varun,
not read.
Varun,
Yeah,
Professor
yeah, yeah,
Chandra, yeah,
yeah,
Chandra
sure,
sir
sure.
is here, and uh,
Yeah,
sir, please throw some more light on this discussion.
and you have to remind me of the time because I was not looking at the time.
Yeah, you have, you have time. Yeah, sir, please.
Sir, you have to unmute
Sir, you
yourself.
are muted. Sir, kindly unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Varun. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
sure,
yes,
yes.
yes.
Thank you, Varun. I'm actually very deeply disturbed by your presentation, mainly
Okay.
because what is happening is that you are trying to explain away the whole of philosophical history and nature in terms of biographies. Hmm.
No, only
So
in these two
Aristotle would say certain thing because he had a particular experience. Plato said something because he had a particular experience. Now, what we generally do in philosophy is that we make a distinction between the context of discovery and the context of justification. So the context of discovery may be occasioned by a particular event in my life. So the Vidyottama incidents in case of Kalidas is an incident. But Meghdut does not stand or fall because of uh, how foolish he was when he was engaging with Vidyottama. So that's one very important thing, that you cannot explain away all philosophical problems and all philosophical solutions in terms of biographies and incidents. That's one. Number two, if you look at biographies or biographical writing, one of the most classic writing is actually the writing of Descartes, Discourse and Method. Discourse and Method in the beginning begins like a biography, that how he was traveling from France to Germany, and how on a particular occasion when he was confronted with the idea that he had discovered the truth, which he had not, then he thinks and then he comes to the thought of I think, therefore I am. But that I think, therefore I am is justified by the argument, not by the occasion. So the point is that if philosophy is to be understood, then in case of Aristotle, in posterior analytic, he was saying that there is something which we call a study of being qua being. So Aristotle had studied a lot of empirical things about fish and animals and plants, and he had also studied 129 constitutions before he wrote Politics. But that is not philosophy. His philosophy is metaphysics, which is actually a study of being qua being. Similarly, in Descartes, that actually the study is about the nature of reality. Similarly, when you come to Kant, it is about the limits of actual and possible experience. So he's not talking about subjectivity, but about the nature of subjecthood. Who's the logical subject? Similarly, when you come to the analytic thinkers, there again, in the Sellerian definition, you see that how most general concepts hang together is the kind of idea that they are talking about in philosophy. They may be occasioned by individual idiosyncrasies, by insults, by Christianity, by encounter in life, by being cheated by lovers, etc., etc. But those are occasions which would make the whole story more interesting. But they would not form the argument for the philosophical thesis. That's one. The other question, which I think also is very important, which is this. When Kierkegaard especially talks about subjectivity is truth, he's talking especially in relationship to religion. And he's saying that in religion, my relationship to God, what matters is that how am I related to it? He would not be saying that actually what you said, that, it does not matter whether water is H2O or not. It does matter. Everything in the world matters. So the theories of truth, the theories of reality, all do matter. But in religion, it does not matter, because there you are looking at a personal relationship with God rather than the objective fact or that there is an existent God and it is scientifically provable. Now, this has to be very carefully understood, because as philosophers, we are not empirical scientists. The only thing that we have is language and a capacity to analyze. Now, I am finding it very, very disturbing when you are saying that, things can be explained only in terms of biography. Uh, and again, the biographical account that you are taking will be based upon a certain framework. So it may be a Lacanian framework, it may be a Freudian framework, it may be a Jungian framework, and each of them is a scientific theory and subject to criticism. So therefore, I think you need to throw a little more light on this.
Okay. So first of all, you were using the term biography. I would want to use the word autobiographical when the subject himself is talking about
Yes,
it,
I'm
not the
also talking
biography.
about autobiography. Descartes is writing in the form of an autobiography.
Okay, okay. No, no, you were
Well,
using the term
Varun,
biography.
No,
Okay.
it's autobiography. It's autobiography.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my first thing is I was not saying that all ideas of all philosophers and all philosophical contributions are to be viewed in this lens. I am just saying in that context of these two philosophers, where they themselves are explaining and accepting that they are responding to their own life. And then second is you took the example of Descartes, for example. We cannot say that all his philosophical contribution is just rational. For example, he cannot renounce God because he is a devout Christian, and in spite of his dualistic framework, he still retains God. He does not subject God to the same level of inquiry because he's emotionally attached to the idea. He's not saying
No,
that
no. He's not emotionally attached to the idea. What he's saying is that, and in fact, please be cautious. Descartes is saying that actually the laws of logic, like Leibniz, are founded upon the veracity of God. So he's a believer, but that believer is not a question of emotion. Secondly, and more importantly, Varun, I think you should be very, very careful about the fact that in case of Descartes, the opposition is not between reason and emotion. The opposition is between reason and matter. Reason, feeling, emotion, experience are all part of consciousness. So this is in fact the biggest confusion which everybody is subjecting to. So the reason emotion contrast does not hold any water in case of Descartes because they are part of consciousness.
Okay. So okay. So would
Because
you
he's only
agree
opposing
that?
consciousness to matter, extension.
But would you agree
Varun,
that? Would you
Varun,
say?
Varun,
Okay.
sorry for interruption. Our President Balram sir is also here. And
Okay.
so please join the discussion.
I was just enjoying the discussion. So that is also another way of joining is, some of us should listen. Can you get me permission to share my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We can see you. Yeah.
So please, yeah.
So I can show you what I think. So that no question about what my feelings are. It just will be directly. All right. So there we go. So I have opinions about here is my one opinion about Kierkegaard and Professor Balram Singh. Says knowledge is wealth that cannot be stolen, but can be explained another way. Wealth of knowledge cannot be stolen, but can be hidden. So I think what Professor Chandra is saying, and of course Varun is saying also, there are different views. And even though Professor Chandra is saying he's disturbed, but just Varun's view about it, that's also kind of part of the philosophy. I have another one. What if everything in the world were a misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? Well, misunderstanding is the exaggeration of ignorance. So sometimes we create misunderstanding, and ignorance is, well, I think that in terms of this, I'll stop sharing here. I'll some couple more comments. Ignorance or autobiography or biography or family description, all these things are the perception of somebody. And I think Professor Chandra will agree that these things also change with time. Yeah, I change my own opinion with time because of experience or because of knowledge. I mean, today I'm listening to you and I was taking notes about these things. The Professor Chandra just said subjectivity to reality. He talked about religion, not about anything else. Well, and he did make a good point of whether you are talking about as a scientist or as a philosopher. So he told me when I was in Rahul's place in Banaras, BHU, he said that Balram Singh is not a trained philosopher, which is true. So he expects people to be trained and talk like that, like you have a trained dogs in the airports, they just go around and find out all these things the way they are trained to be told. I mean, maybe some of us not trained, but then we bring some other ideas, and that will eventually bring to the philosophical milieu, because philosophy, somebody like Professor Chandra will think about it in philosophical ways. So, for example, Newton really watched an apple dropping on the earth, and he thought about gravitational force. I mean, that doesn't mean it cannot be applied to now rockets. It can be applied to rockets also, and I think the due respect can still be given to Newton and his observation. So I mean, eventually we all make observations. Some of it even like to make an argument without observation, but sometimes you maybe do make the observation yourself, or sometimes maybe you help me make the observation. You do the philosophy, and you give all kind of possibilities, and everything is, as in science and also probably in philosophy, everything that we can think of or imagine and argue or write is true. It may be true in your mind, it may be true some other place in this universe. There are, I mean, it is right now it's evening for you, so I will say good evening, but actually it's not evening here, it's morning here. So it may be good evening is true there, but good morning is true here. Be just depending on the position. So it's wonderful to have this kind of conversation, particularly when we talk about autobiography. I mean, to me, it looks like a philosophy versus darshan. Maybe philosophy is different than darshan, and we need to think. Many philosophers, including Gandhi, I mean, Gandhi was thrown out of the train, and then he started thinking about all this. He wasn't thinking about all this before then, because he knows the circumstances. But then he thought about a lot. I mean, he thinks about non-violence in such a way that most people think that's ridiculous. They think, no, that cannot be true. But then he does talk about it, and he does practice to a certain degree in his life. And so did Valmiki. He saw some birds being killed, and he, something that came out of him. And then, of course, Professor Chandra talked about Kalidas. He was apparently kicked out of his supposedly marriage to Vidyottama, and that kind of got him out, and he started writing so many other kind of things that he wrote. So anyway, I feel this is wonderful to have such discussion, especially as somebody who does experimental science. I find shelter in philosophy of whatever observation that I have. Sometimes I have some crazy observation. My science colleague don't think about it, but philosophers are very very kind, and they accept. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Rahul to share his thoughts.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Varun, for your interesting presentation. I have certain points to make, and I want to place myself between what you have been saying and what Professor Chandra just mentioned. This autobiographical philosophy as autobiographical need to be seen also in the larger context, or maybe this biographical understanding is largely placed in the cultural or historical understanding, right? So, I mean, your own biographical understanding is not completely in isolation. So the idea of understanding someone or misunderstanding will always arise in an intercultural space, or you can say intersubjective space, right? So if you are understanding someone, right, or even if you are misunderstanding, or even if you're having a certain personal subjective understanding, it requires a kind of intersubjective space, or what we call cultural space. So I think when you are talking about philosophy as autobiography or autobiographical philosophy, it also need to be seen in a larger context of culture, history, or language game. And that is where I think you can also, escape the danger of being absolutist subjective, because I think if you place yourself or anyone extremely subjective and eliminate the point of context of others, right, then I think there is no understanding of subjective itself, right? So, and that is where, this idea of justification, right, which is not a kind of, which is different from the occurrences of individual occurrences, right? And the justification is something which Professor Chandra is saying is more tied down to the philosophical reflection. And that's true, but I would insist that this, the part of the justificatory part that philosophy does over the individual occurrences, right, may not be necessarily to be seen as universalistic, as absolutistic. Even we can have a justification within intercultural space, and yet that justification may also turn out to be fallible, or maybe we can move further when there are different contexts, right? And your justification may also shift, right? So any kind of truth that we talk about, even if the subjective truth we are talking about, it will be, I mean, when you're up, I mean, suppose if Kierkegaard is opposed to the Christendom or Christianity, right? Now, even his own subjective understanding is either in opposition or in relation with something more than oneself, right? So either you are connected in opposition to the other, or context, or individuals, or cultural space, or in more syncretic relation, but you cannot philosophically have any understanding of subjective or individuals, right, until unless you see it in a intersubjective, dialogical, or contextual sphere. So that is what I would like to, I mean, that is what my idea so far about your presentation is. Now you can, if you feel like you can, I mean, try to respond to it.
Ashifra, is there
Varun,
time?
you have collective choice
Yeah.
to answer all of them one by one or together.
No, it's
You have time. You have time.
okay. So I majorly want to respond to Professor Chandra because, but I don't know if he is there or not. But still, I
He's
think he has
here.
mischaracterized my position. I am not making an absolutist position that all philosophers, the philosophy of all philosophers in all extent is a reflection of the autobiography. My main point was that in case of Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, their philosophy is, and they are admitting to it, that their philosophy is a reflection of the lives they have lived and the choices they have made. And then they are merely pointing out that in cases of other philosophers also sometimes what they point out to be an abstract thought has its origin in some emotion and in some whim, in some fancy, in some opinion, and later they disguise it as an abstraction and a rational fact. So we cannot rely on philosophers themselves to admit that they have done. For example, he's taking the example of Descartes. Nietzsche is precisely saying this, that these philosophers are clothing their own prejudices, or for want of a better term, or we can say their ideas in the garb of rational ideas, whereas they have started, these ideas started in their minds at some kind of end. It's some kind of a not irrational, but an opinion or a non-rationally grounded fact. So this was my main thing, that I am not saying that all philosophy can be explained away. I am just saying, just as he wants me to accept that he does not want to accept that all philosophy is autobiographical, will he also accept that none of the philosophy is autobiographical? So we have to take a middle position, that sometimes what philosophy we have comes from an autobiographical standpoint, and sometimes it is more rational, more well thought out, more diverse from your own experience. And then second thing I want to respond is where he says that in case of Kierkegaard, the notion of subjective truth is linked only to the religious sphere. I don't accept this, and I think when he makes a distinction between the three stages of life, in all the stages of life, the transition from one stage to another, there is a subjective truth at work. For example, if I am in the aesthetic life and I want to move to the ethical life, then the truth for me is I have to again, I have to see what is the truth for me, whether I want to remain the aesthetic life or the ethical life. What is the ethical life? It is characterized by a job, marriage, having children, contributing to the society in some form of a citizenship. So in all of these cases, there is a choice, there is a subjective truth for me. Otherwise, the objective truth will be the same for everybody. Everyone will have a job, everyone will marry, everyone will have children. Still, we find that in all these stages, people are not the same, because their truths are different. Some, for example, I am a teacher. I may not want to become a teacher. Someone is a mother. Someone may not want to become a mother. Someone may want to still continue with the aesthetic stage of life. So in every stage, there is this a concept of a subjective truth. The truths of the society are not the similar for everyone, whether in religious sphere or in the ethical sphere or in the aesthetic sphere. So this I won't be willing to agree. Rest, since I am not an authority on Descartes the way he is, maybe in case of Descartes, this criticism does not work. But it is not my position that all philosophers, the work of all philosophers is characterized by their autobiographical position. And just as Rahul sir was saying, we need to find a middle ground between where we do not have to take an absolutist viewpoint. Our lives, in our lives, just as Professor Balram said, we change our minds, we change our positions, our experiences change us, and it would be foolish to see if it would be foolish to hold the same positions throughout. For example, Gandhi was a firm believer in Varnashram in the beginning of his career. Towards the later era of his career, he did not have the same views. He had different views regarding the blacks in Africa. He did not have the same views, and so we have same views in some regards. We have different views. What changes these views? It is our life that changes. It is our life experience that change our views. So in this regard, I would say that what Kierkegaard and Nietzsche are saying is holds value. Obviously, I do not mean that every thought, every rational thought is basically just a more metamorphosis of some thing that happened in your life. That is not my position. So yeah.
Yeah. Have you read that book from Sarah Bakewell, The Existential Cafe?
No, but I
It's
have it in
very,
my wishlist, but I have not yet
yeah,
got to read.
uh, there is a chapter. First chapter is What a Horror Existentialism, and
Mm.
uh, it is beautifully defined and described the various ideas of all the existential philosophers very beautifully in storytelling way. And there you can find uh, all these kind of questions, all these kind of answers. I mean, we must read that book, Existential Cafe.
Yeah.
So,
Chitra, may
One
I
one
ask a
last.
question?
yeah,
Okay.
Alok sir, please welcome. Please welcome.
Oh, so thank you very much, Varun. And I am quite,
Sir,
though I,
can
uh,
you switch on your camera, sir?
yeah, actually, some problem with internet, so I lost twice. I lost the connection. But now I think that you had a very good quarrel with Professor Rakesh Chandra. His position of very objectivistic truth, and your position is more or less Kierkegaardian, Nietzschean, and subjectivistic truth. No, I would not go into that. My question is, what was the influence of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche on the later existentialist philosophers? Because this is the thing which today I was thinking of, because I worked on Sartre. So now how Sartre is related to this type of thinking, because he is not a believer, and he is also not a you can say believer in some sort of Superman or something like that. So what sort of political implication comes out of this way of thinking? Because I am very much worried that Nietzsche's name was taken in the whole ideology of fascism. He is an inspirator of fascism. So this is more dangerous, I think, the term. And this the thing that this whole idea of perspectival truth that comes
Perspective.
from the perspectival truth which comes from them is very much close to the postmodernism these
Yes.
days.
Yes.
How you look this connection? And again, my question to be that how is it possible then to have a natural science in this context? Because as Professor Chandra was saying, he is taking context of discovery and context of justification. This is more a methodology of natural science than that of philosophy. So
Yes, yes.
how will you look into these implications of this type of thinking, Kierkegaardian and Nietzsche? Thank you.
Yes. Sir, if we have to see their influences, so influences both on the level of thought as well as on the level of style of writing. For example, we see in Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, it is almost a kind of literary. For example, in Thus Spake Zarathustra, it is not like a philosophical book. It's like a religious book where a prophet is coming down and talking to his disciples and the people who are listening to him. Then there, in Kierkegaard's work, there is storytelling. There is a almost a novel-like atmosphere where there are happenings, there are characters. So how this influenced later thinkers is, and you took the name of Sartre. If you see, Sartre is not only writing Being and Nothingness, he's also writing plays. He's also writing novels. So for the first time, they started a movement where you could express philosophical ideas through literary works or philosophical slash literary works because their opinion was that the absurdity, or not to use the word absurdity, but the different circumstances of human life cannot be adequately conveyed through philosophical treatises, and literature has to be brought in some respect so that through the various life choices and various circumstances faced by the characters, one can have a grasp of what goes on actually in real life. So we can see later philosophers like Camus, existentialist philosophers like Camus, Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, then uh, Marcel, all these people have written novels, all these people have written plays. So in a way, the ability to engage with your audience through literary works has been started by these two philosophers. Then, if you say, I'm only remembering your natural science question, there was one question in between. Uh, yeah, Nietzsche's
This,
perspective. Yeah. Okay, there was one
that is
question in between.
postmodernism connection as well as connection with political philosophy of fascism.
Yes. With Kierkegaard, we do not see a definite politics because for him, the religious life is higher than the ethical life, and politics is a realm of the ethical, and religious life is beyond the ethical. So in Kierkegaard, we do not see a direct politics, but in Nietzsche, Nietzsche's idea of Superman has been misused by the Germans. They thought of Superman as a blonde Aryan beast, they say, like who has power and who Hitler wanted everyone to be like, he wanted to have that ideal. But Nietzsche's ideal of Superman is just one who is very creative, who goes beyond the natural capabilities of man, who can withstand the highest amount of suffering. For example, Leonardo da Vinci would be his Superman. Uh, then this Richard Wagner would be his Superman, someone who can artistically, who can bring into his art what normal people cannot feel, who can go beyond what normal people can go beyond. He is not some kind of a racist as Hitler would want him to be. So it is a very maligned and misused idea. Superman with a very masculine, with a very uh, oppressive kind of a, or a very powerful army, military kind of a thing is not present in Nietzsche. It is just a mischaracterization of Nietzschean thought. And as far as postmodernism is concerned, yes, Nietzsche's idea of perspectival truth or truths as illusions or truths as versions rather than a complete truth is what has influenced the theory of postmodernism. That is true. In that regard, I would say uh, it is basically in what realm do you want the truth to function. If we are talking about sciences, I don't think they will have much issue with the truths, the idea of truth as we find in natural science, although Nietzsche questioned that also. But in general, I think there are two realms. One is the realm where we are talking about our ordinary life, where we need to do some things. For example, we want to build a house, then gravity is a truth there. Then we want to do some job, then there are financial truths there, there are other truths there. But in the realm of our internal lives, objective truth has no value. It is only subjective truth which holds. It is only the subjective truth that, for example, I may have a father, but he may not be a father to me. Objectively, he is a father to me, but subjectively, he is not my father. My father could be someone else. My father could be God. So in this way, the truths have a different realm. The realm of natural truth is different, natural sciences, and the realm of this kind of truth is very, very different. And their contention is that it is the realm of subjective truth which is more important to us. As I said, if it turns out tomorrow that there is a nitrogen is 79% or 100% in the atmosphere, it won't make a difference to any of my echoes. But suppose one of my friends is no more. This would turn my life upside down, because this is a truth. For them, truth is that which in which I have some investment, which in fact in which influences my life in some way. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, so they won't have any much issue with the natural sciences. They will say that they are two different realms and with their own areas of application. Yeah.
This is very interesting. How can you say that laborers are suffering from poverty, running back from Bombay to their native places, they don't suffer any sort of objective truth? This is something, a
No,
big
they suffer,
claim.
they suffer of this. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying all of them may suffer it in some own way, or in their own subjective ways. For example, someone might have a house and some land in his own area, the others might not have. So the same suffering is different to them. Someone is married, he has his own family to take. Someone is not married, they are suffering the same objective truth, but in different ways. That is my. I'm not saying that they don't suffer any objective. That is not my what I'm saying. I'm just saying everyone, even if two people are turned away from, like two people are what they lose their jobs. It might have a different influence on both of them. In our offices, we see there is a bad boss, there are 5 workers. Everyone has a different relationship. Someone might take it just lying down, others might just be cheerful. So everyone experiences objectivity also in their own subjective ways. That is what I'm saying. Objectively, it is the same. Happenings are the same. Corona, for example, did not affect everyone in the same way. Yeah, that's all.
Varun, can I just
I
also
think
have two very quick queries? I mean,
Yes.
this idea of which is there in Kierkegaard, the will to power, right?
Nietzsche.
Sorry, Nietzsche. So, I mean, you rightly pointed out that he may not have actually himself realized that possibilities of this idea, the will to power. But then many other people are saying that there is, I mean, derision or denigration of people who have not made any phenomenal contribution uh, to the society, and those who have not made any contribution, their life should not be, or their life is not worthy of respect. So suppose if I'm just an old man and I'm not able to make any contribution to the society, right, then my life is not worthy of being or deserving a human respect. So this is one criticism of this Nietzsche's conception of will to power. And another thing is when this idea of truth as subjective, if it is really taken to the another extreme, but though I believe that no conception of understanding can be really had in isolation with other people or culture or society, right? Whether you are having in relation with others or in opposition, but the others are there, the part of your understanding, even if you are willing to call it subjective understanding. But in some cases, if it is really taken to the another extreme, right, you may lose the connect with whatever social and physical reality is. And in that way, you can become fanatic, or you may turn out to be people like beasts, as we all see in Hitler. So that possibility you cannot completely eliminate if that is how people read Nietzschean philosophy. So how would you like to respond to this?
I would respond to the second one.
we can take one more question from Ramesh sir.
Okay.
One quick question, and you can collectively answer them. Yeah.
Yes, good
Hello,
evening to
sir.
all.
Good
Yes,
evening.
yes. Hello, hello, everyone. Good evening. So yes, in continuation of Dr. Rahul's question, so I also have one question. Just I am adding to Dr. Rahul's question that yes, because of Nietzsche's writing of Superman, Overman. So what happened? You are saying that his ideas were misused by Hitler or somebody else, Aryan race, concept of Aryan race. But at the same time, he also has very high regard for Manu, our ancient lawgiver, and his view of social order or something like that. So what about the others? Because Nietzsche was also against democracy, against mass education, against women. His ideas are very strong and very against women and the general masses. So how would you respond to those? Because criticism is leveled against him, definitely, because of his notion of Superman. And Superman is something, I think, someone who does not like the masses, not the crowd. So this is my question.
Okay.
Because
I
it
think
has ethical implications. Because of his notion of Superman, it has ethical implications, social implications, moral implications. Yeah, please.
Varun, you have only 2 minutes to respond. 2-3 minutes.
Okay, so I try to
Yeah.
see, first of all, we should not shy away. Being a Nietzsche scholar, I should not shy away from the fact that Nietzsche is an elitist thinker. Aristocrat is it is a kind of aristocratism he is talking about. It is kind of a Platonic view where there are rulers, there are workers, and rulers are superior. And Nietzsche says that I read somewhere that even to bring forth one genius, we have to sacrifice like thousands of other people. We should not, and so we should not shy away from this fact. But see, he says he is a philosopher who believes in genius and the capability of genius. And he says that genius evolves like very seldom. And humankind is moved forward through geniuses, not through the common masses. The common masses are those who have regard only for their comfort, their luxury, who do not want to have any kind of suffering. So his overman is one who has the ability to undertake all kinds of suffering, and that the reward he is giving is that higher position. It is not that he is just getting that. For example, in case of Plato, the rulers cannot have families of their own. They cannot marry. Many things are denied to the rulers. So it is in this respect also that he honors Manu because he thinks that Manu keeps some people higher. I don't think that he studied Manu in detail, but from whatever was available to him, he thought that Manu's order was a kind of Platonic order where rulers were above and there were workers and this and that, and there was no intermingling. So he is definitely an aristocratic philosopher. And if we have to debate this, we have to debate on the merits of aristocratic philosophy. And I think that's a much bigger debate. Whether, like we were talking about, he was against mass education, yes, because he thought that to educate the mass, you have to bring the standard of education down. Rather than we can't bring the mass up to that level, so the standard has to be brought down. So wherever humankind has reached, you have to make it accessible to everyone, which lowers the standard and impedes the growth of an genius. So I don't think this question can be answered in like 2 minutes, but I think it is a question of aristocratism versus a kind of a communist or a general a philosophy which involves everyone, a philosophy of equality, because he was against equality also. He said equality does not exist. It is a Christian idea. People are equal in the eyes of God, and from that you have this idea that people are equal in the eyes of law. There is no equality in nature. So it's a much bigger debate. So I would just have to say that he is an aristocratic philosopher, so we have to look at him through that lens only. And
Okay,
the
thank you.
idea of his ideas that have been abused, he would say that these are lower people who are exploiting my ideas. They do not understand my ideas, this and that. And obviously, it's in these kind of extreme ideas, there are bound to be people who misuse those ideas. And I'm not defending him on every count. His ideas about women, his ideas about general people were not very encouraging, but he has his reasons for it, and we have to discuss those reasons first, and that would require another kind of talk.
Something like the survival of the fittest kind of thing, I think. Darwinism, social Darwinism.
It is not exactly
Sir,
Darwinism
we
because
are running out of time, and we can have panel discussion over this. Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
so thank you so much. Thank you, Varun. Thank you, Rahul sir. Thank you, Ramesh sir. And
Thank you.
now I would like to invite my colleague and friend, Dr. Aparna Ji, to give vote of thanks. Yeah.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Shapraji. Firstly, we are very happy that the initiative of Philosophy Cafe by our Kurum School of Advanced Sciences is going great by having so many renowned philosophers among us every 16th of among us on every 16th of every month. And that's a great initiative, I think, taken by Dr. Shipra Dikshit ji, along with other KSAS team members, and of course, the director and the president of INADS and KSAS. And before this, I would also like to present my gratitude towards the young speaker of today's talk, and Dr. Varun Sharma ji, for his enlightening talk, and also for sharing his philosophical reflections on various aspects of philosophy, though I did not understand much, but still it's new for me to understand the philosophical different thoughts on the philosophy on various aspects of it. So, and also we were delighted and happy to have among us the renowned scholar Professor Chandra ji, and that too for initiating various the talks, the discussions of today's evening. So we are thankful to him as well. And again, we just met our lots of philosophers present here, like Dr. Rahul Maurya ji, Dr. Priyanka Mishra ji, then even Dr. Dr. Alok Tandon ji was not there in the KSAS program, but he was there in our Philosophy Cafe. Sometimes I have seen him also. And also Dr. Ramesh Chandra ji. So we are also thankful to them, and Miss Riya Gupta ji, because we met them in the KSAS program only, annual symposium, and also they are present here and they have very interactive session. They keep this discussions on and have very interactive session we just had. So we are thankful to them also, and also the team members of KSAS, Dr. Shruti, Dr. Alok, Dr. Abhinandan ji, and Dr. Avinash ji, and of course our director, Dr. Rajkumar ji. We are thankful to him also, and others also, for giving this freedom of organizing this Philosophy Cafe. And of course, our president, Professor Balram Singh ji, for sharing his thoughts with the presentation he made, a very brief presentation. He could speak on that at least, I think, half an hour if we can give him time. Even though he talked briefly, it was nice, sir. We are thankful to you also. And again, the moderator of the session, Dr. Shipra Dikshit ji. We are thankful to you for organizing such program. And again, हम सबको मिलने का मौका मिला through this Philosophy Cafe. And thank you, Shipra ji.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aparna ji,
for the Philosophy Cafe.
Yeah,
Please,
अभी लेके बैठी.
You are KSAS, I am INADS.
Yeah.
Even sir is having.
Varun, you missed it. You should have the.
Sir,
in
I
our
also like
symposium.
You can just send it to me. You can send it to me otherwise also.
Yes, we also like.
You also need to get one.
So those who have missed, even sir is showing School of Indic Studies. We have different departments, so we have a lot of coffee mugs with us. So those who have missed, they are already invited for next year's annual symposium.
Sure. Thank you, Aparna ji.
I just want to say one thing. It is very good to see Rahul sir and Priyanka and Ramesh sir. And last thing is, I might be a bad messenger. You should read Nietzsche and Kierkegaard by yourself. Maybe some things which I may have said would be more clear to you when you read them yourself, because sometimes a bad messenger ruins the message. So I think if everyone reads them by their own, so you will be better able to understand them. My greetings to everyone and thanks to everyone who listened.
Thank you, Varun. Next time you will be speaking on Death of God. Actually, I really want to listen to you on that topic. Or yeah, and thank you all. Thank you for being participated here. Stay connected with us for the next session. In March, we are going to celebrate Women's Day. So we are organizing a panel discussion on 16th of March. Name of speaker and the topic will be announced very soon. So stay connected with us. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You,
Yeah.
namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Varun. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Bye bye.